Hello, Søren. Welcome to my video projects. I would like to talk about in this video Alan Seeger, Rupert Brooke, Wilfred Owen, and Secret to Zoom. I'll talk about their backgrounds, what they did in the war, their poems, and in some cases statements, and their relationship with the wars. Okay, so starting with Alan Seeger. He was born in New York in 1888. He went and he graduated from Harvard in 1910, and in his class there were T.S. Eliot and John Reed as other names. It was a very special class. He couldn't. In 1912 he moved to France, and he couldn't join the French army when he was an American when the war broke out in 1914. So he joined the French Foreign Legion, and I will be referring to it as just the Legion in the video. In the war, he volunteered to the war on August 24th in 1914. He served as a private in the Legion, and his Legion was located in northern France, where there didn't see much combat, and that annoyed Seeger. He was fond of war. In 1915, the Legion was set to make this great offense in Champagne, France, but it didn't go well, and of this he was very excited. So he wrote a letter back home saying, and I quote, "I expect to march right up to the Eisner Born on an irresistible elan. It will be the greatest moment of my life." So here you can see his happiness for the war and really just fighting in general. And while this offensive never really happened, his unit spent the late 1915 and early 1916 on reserve, and in that period Seeger he had bronchitis, so he wasn't. Although he was on reserve, he wouldn't be fully able to fight in the war if something broke out. And when he had bronchitis, he wrote his very famous poem, Rendezvous with Death. And then later he died by the massive attack by the Allied at the Somme River. His view on the war, he was like a fan of the war, perhaps. We can see that as he volunteered to the Legion, not even like just the Legion for foreigners, not just specifically Americans, but foreigners, so he would very much like to fight, and he doesn't care about dying in the war. He even considers it being the most noble way to die. In fact, he said, it may mean something more wonderful than life than die for something you fight for. And he actually compares being in war with sport, referring to the thrills it gave him to get the adrenaline pumping as well. His poem Rendezvous with Death, of course, it means meeting with death, so we know that he's going to die, and he's okay with it, and he has found peace with it, so that's just basically what he's talking about during it. Okay, so next up is Rupert Brooke. He attended to a prestigious school where his father was already headmaster, so maybe on a cheap note. He studied Latin and Greek, and then he began to write poetry. After he was done with this school, he joined Cambridge in 1906 and graduated in 1909. The themes in his poetry was love and nature, so he was a happy person, perhaps. In the May 19, he traveled to the US, where he first spent 4 months on land. Afterwards, he spent 7 months on the Pacific, where 3 of those 7 months were in Tahiti, and it is said that it was here where he had the most unbroken happiness of his life, and he wrote the best poems of his life as well. So he writes very, very good when he's happy, compared to others who write very good when they're sad. So yeah, in the war he joined the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve. They went to Belgium, where they saw absolutely no military action. It was very quiet area in Belgium. In February 1915, he was told to sail to the Dardanelles for the Gallipoli campaign that would begin that spring. And during this journey, this sailing, he got blood poisoning which could not be saved or healed. So he died on April 23rd, in 1915, and he was buried on the Greek island of Skyros. In England mourned him. He was a very loved character in England during to his positiveness and that sort of thing. And he was loved throughout the country at the time, but after the war, critics began to say that he was naive and he was way too sentimental about the war, so kind of a mixed picture about him. According to his view on the war, he has no problem by dying for his country. He will then have done his duty, and it is very honorable. He thinks it's a very honorable thing to die for a country. He had a very nice view of the war, as he describes the fields in some of his poems, like beautiful, green and blooming. And he had this poem which is called A Soldier, and that's talking about dying for a country, and there was always be some Englishmen no matter where you go, and how much it means to fight for your country. Okay, so number 3 is Wilfred Owen. He came from humble beginnings. He attended schools in Shrewsbury and Liverpool. His family could not afford university, so went to France so he could teach English. While he was in France, the war broke out. In the war, he was commissioned into the Manchester Regiment in June 1916. In the March the following year, took part in the British attack on the Hindenburg Line. He was in close proximity to a bursting shell, and as a result, he got shell-shocked and was sent to the Craig Lockhart military hospital in Edinburgh. Here he met his idol Sassoon, secret Sassoon, as I will be talking about later, and they became good friends and published, amongst other things, the classic work, collaboration in fact, Anthem for Doomed Youth. His view on the war, at the beginning he saw it as something great and heroic, which later changed to ugly and not very great following this shell shock that he got. This can be seen in his famous poem Dulce et decorum est, excuse my French, pardon my French, where the reader really can feel his hatred toward this kind of war. And this poem it's just clear throughout it that he really doesn't like war, and becomes very clear in his poem. He says that the men who win this war shouldn't tell the kids about the war because it was brutal and very ugly, and nothing was never really perfect and nice or pretty, so nothing worth it. And last but not least, we have Secret Sassoon. He, as Owen, he came from humble beginnings. He was very innocent. He was born in 1886. He seemed to be very innocent growing up, as he hunted foxes, played cricket, played golf, and wrote romantic verses. And he was born into a wealthy Jewish family. When war came, he took his spike, and as every other young Englishman, and wrote to the army and signed up, volunteered for the army. Because of this innocence, he had not like a clear view of life, so he was very surprised by all the brutality in this war, and this was just a very big contrast to his normal life. And after some of his fellow officers passed away, he went completely off, bought a suicidal. This exploit he went on, and he earned a name in the military Mad Jack, which was kind of ironic that he was this innocent young fella. And at the beginning of the war, he thought that the war was all Germany's fault, but as the war went on and on and on, he began to realize it was the political leadership, like something was prolonging the war, which led to his infamous statement. Against the empire and all the leaders. Normally, these kind of statements that go against your country would be punished with death, but his fellow poet Robert Graves convinced the men in charge that he was suffering from a shell shock, and therefore he was sent to Craig Lockhart. When we know he met Wilfred Owen. So his view on the war, well, at first he saw it as mandatory, like just okay, war broke out, get my bike and off to the war. As it moved on, he the more war he experienced, the less he liked it. It was not him. And in 1917, he issued this statement saying that war was being prolonged by those in power. So, which is obviously controversial because why would you prolong a war which just causing death? But he thought that the people are making money out of it, like all the hardware, the guns, and for example, the guns. So he was not, and there was taking no regards for human life, which was his biggest problem. And then he had this poem called "Does It Matter?" Well, he talks with great irony about the things you lose when you're in war, like your sight or your leg, and if it does really matter to living. And he talks with great irony, and he's very mad at this war. And all these things that you can have, they don't really matter because you win the war and you fought very bravely. So yeah.